to the right, caught over the middle, and into.
He's at the 45. Are you kidding? Oh, he's gonna go!
Brady gets hit, the ball is out. And Philadelphia has it.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to NFL Turf Talk live here on DSM Media's Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter channels. This is our divisional round recap. I am one half of your host, Dylan Davis. You can find me on Twitter at DylanJD98. To my right, my co-host, Scotty. You can find him on Twitter as well at Scotty Johnny. You can find all of our great content and shows over on at DSM_media on Twitter. Hit that follow button while you're on the page, and also check out the link tree in our bio to take you to every social media platform we are available on. Obviously, if you guys want to be interactive throughout tonight's show or any of our shows over here on DSM, make sure you hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Turn on notifications for whenever we go live. It is the best spot to get your thoughts, comments, questions all pulled up on the screen. We're going to start with the Jags-Chiefs recap. We're going to get into the Eagles-Giants with the bulk of the show, and then we'll wrap up with Sunday's slate. But my man, how was your divisional round weekend? Would you say the product you watched, just from a pure football standpoint, entertainment standpoint, was it better than the wild card weekend? Was it the same? How did you feel about this week?
That's a good question, man. I'm not sure, because some of these games were pretty dominating fashion, to say the least.
Yeah.
So I guess the first game and the last game kind of went down to the wire, especially that last one. That was pretty competitive, but at the same time, not a lot of offensive firepower. I was completely off on that prediction, as far as that being a 19-12 game. So better than the wild card weekend. I'm trying to think back. I mean, it was better for me because the Eagles are playing, but
Yeah, right,
was
right.
it better overall entertainment? Yeah, it's the best teams playing now, right? It has to be better entertainment, but it still wasn't as good as maybe I was expecting, in a sense. That Cincinnati Buffalo game, that one kind of threw me off a little bit. I didn't expect them to go out there and dominate the Bills like that, but overall, solid weekend nonetheless. Big Eagles dub. I'm happy about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's kind of like the NCAA tournament a little bit with the progression. Like, you love the first 2 days, right? Because it's just so much basketball. There's so much going on. And we all love a Cinderella story. I understand that. But obviously, once you get into the Elite Eight, the Final Four, the national championship game, that's when you get the cream of the crop. That's when you get the more competitive, better teams playing. And that's what you got. No more Skylar Thompson, no Seattle Seahawks and Geno Smith this weekend. But nonetheless, 2 tight games, like you said, and 2 lopsided, one-sided types of games. But let's start with what kicked off the divisional round weekend at Arrowhead, the Chiefs and Jags. Chiefs take down the Jacksonville Jaguars 27-20. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes' high ankle sprain went down got landed on, and obviously did not look right the rest of the game. Now, he was still able to do some incredible things on a hobbled ankle, on a bum foot. But I think that brought the game a little bit more close. Trevor Lawrence obviously had himself a decent day, but I got to tell you, man, this is going to be a common theme as we break down these games for you today, and it's something that I've preached on this show all year long for teams and play callers to do. And I got to start off by saying, I'm a little disappointed with Dougie P from this one. And I say that because of one reason. You got to stick to the run. This game was 17-10 at half. It was a one-possession game for 90% of this one. Travis Etienne was carrying at a clip of over 6 yards per carry, and you gave the ball to the dude 10 times. You had your first-time playoff quarterback dropping back almost 40 times in this one. And you look at the Chiefs, they won the battle, right? Isaiah Pacheco, 12 for 95. McKinnon, 11 for 25. So they ran the ball over 23 times as a unit. You gave the ball to Etienne, who was going off at an explosive clip, excuse me. So that's where my mind goes to. I think Dougie P had an incredible year, what he was able to accomplish, that comeback against the Chargers. But just like Brian Dable and the Giants, which we'll get into in a moment, their seasons were cut short. And I wasn't happy from that perspective with Doug.
Yeah, I can see your point there. I didn't exactly, kind of see it from that perspective, but looking back on it, definitely see what you're talking about. Only 10 carries for ETN, who you could argue is their best weapon on offense.
Yeah.
Most versatile weapon for sure, right? But just looking at the numbers, it kind of just shows how much separation was between these teams, right?
Right.
Because Mahomes wasn't 100% at the
Mhm.
end of the day. So just to see the Chiefs come out of this game with a W, it's what I expected overall, nonetheless. What I would say, turnovers and, like you said, just discipline, sticking with the run would ultimately be what I would attribute the loss to for the Jags. You had just the one interception. I'm not even saying that, Trevor Lawrence went
Right.
overboard. It wasn't anything close to the 4 interceptions from that wild card game, but it shows you how close everything is when you're playing the Kansas City Chiefs. And how about Chad Henne coming in and giving them a touchdown drive as well,
I know,
amongst
man.
all of that turmoil? So you had a bunch of people joking around. Is it the system or is it Mahomes? I don't know if I'll go that far, but it
I
is
hope
funny
no one
just to
actually goes
see
that far, but
the narratives, right? But no, I think now the biggest question for me is obviously Patrick Mahomes' health. I mean, the
Mhm.
Jags. Let's be honest. Did we see them win in this game? Probably
No.
not, in all reality. But to your point, if I had to attribute it to anything, yeah, not getting your star running back the ball, right? That's your young stud. But from the other perspective, just what does Patrick Mahomes look like? What is the
Right.
maximum level that he can get back to? 75%, 80%. I don't even think he can get to 80% with the way that injury looked. And I would imagine it's even more sore today,
Right, the
right?
next day, right, adrenaline going, whatever, they go back to halftime, whatever they pump him up with, give him,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, and, that'll be the case next weekend as well
And
against Cincinnati, but
I did hear I was listening, I was watching Colin Coward. I don't ask me why. It was in the middle of
background
my day
noise.
here. Yeah, just background noise. But nonetheless, I heard him. He brought in Mark Schlereth. He talked about getting whatever they do get. Is it Novocaine? I don't know what it is. It's
Probably.
something that numbs the pain, right? He said he was able to do that with his high ankle sprain, but it also made his foot numb. So he was sitting there as an offensive lineman
Right.
playing with a numb foot. He doesn't think that a quarterback would be able to do that. So that's something to keep in mind. And, we'll obviously talk about the Bengals and the Bills matchup, but we don't want to
Yeah,
get too far ahead of myself. But
Bengals
that's going to be
Chiefs,
the
but yeah.
biggest question coming out of this is that Mahomes ankle.
Yeah, I don't know why my cheeks are so rosy as well, so, excuse the redness, but anyway, no, you bring up a very good point, and we'll be breaking down that matchup later in the week and get more into this Mahomes injury, but Schlereth brings up the fact that he doesn't know if a quarterback could play with a numb foot. That quarterback, especially, you saw even the grimace after every time he was hit or knocked to the
Yeah.
ground, or the second touchdown to Kelsey, I believe. You just saw him getting helped off the ground with this like really hurt look on his face.
Yeah.
And you wonder with a Cincinnati front, like Cincinnati's defense is next level, is next level compared to this Jags defense, right? So
Yeah.
there is a lot of concern going forward, and it's what makes Patty special. The off script plays, the out of the pocket stuff, the scrambling ability
Exactly.
to pick up first downs, and you take that away, that really dynamic player, that really dynamic offense becomes a little less dynamic in the
Yeah.
on the biggest stage. So we'll get into that later. Hopefully,
And
we'll try to hear more about it, but they're not going to give anything away from now until Sunday.
oh no, not at all. Not at all. They're going to keep that a mystery as much as they can. But
And
what I would say from the Chiefs' perspective, if you're the Chiefs, if you're a Kansas City fan, you had to have been rooting hard for Buffalo yesterday, man. Because if I'm the Chiefs,
well,
I just wouldn't want to see the Bengals, man. I really
well,
wouldn't. I feel that they would have a better chance against the Bills, especially with a hobbled Patrick Mahomes, because
that
that
is
Bengals pass
true.
rush
That is true. But
it looked crazy yesterday.
If you're a Chiefs fan, though, would you rather the neutral site or would you rather the home field that you have now
Ah,
with Cincinnati,
that's
right?
fair
So
too.
that
That's
was
fair
one of the
too.
big talking points, and we'll get into that Bills Bengals game because Joe Burrow had something to say about those neutral site seats after that win. But to wrap up this game, basically, I didn't mean to crush Doug Peterson. We applauded Doug
I don't think you did.
right, for what he did against the Chargers and all of this season with Trevor Lawrence. My point was, and you and I discussed it on Saturday morning, if they were going to come away with a win, you had to control specific areas of this game, right?
Yeah.
you had to control time of possession, which how do you do that? Running the football. You had to control the turnover battle. Well, you lost the turnover battle 2-0. You lost time of possession by almost 10 minutes. You lost the rushing battle. You gave up almost 8 yards per carry to Isaiah Pacheco. Not that you had a lot of penalties, but you had 5 penalties to their 3. You were less disciplined than they were. And you had the hobbled MVP quarterback. So if you would, like, my point was, if you would have just done that one minor thing, getting the ball to Travis Etienne a lot, because did Etienne even do anything in the passing game? I don't believe he did, right? Like, no, 3 catches for 18 yards. So they didn't really force him the ball in that aspect. Basically, to your point, get the ball in your best playmaker's hand, especially when you're a major underdog like this. The fact that you went away from it when he was having success. If Travis Etienne came out and his first 7 carries were for 22 yards to 18 yards or less, I would be like, okay, it's not really 10 for 62, dude. And in a one possession game, that's the part that kills me. The game was never out of reach. This wasn't Giants down 28-0 at halftime, and you have to pass the ball to come back. So I did not like it from that point of view. And then obviously, like you said, the Chiefs' talent just showed at the end of the day, right?
And you talk, you pointed out a great point there from your perspective, because now I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, you're right. Just something as simple as that in a 7-point game. In a game where you do have Mahomes get injured, right?
It kind of sets everything else up for failure.
Kind of went Jacksonville's way as much as it could, in a sense. I hate to say that about an injury, but that's just the truth. So for them to not be able to take advantage of that, and then you look at something as blatant as giving up on the run game, it is a little bit of hindsight, right? Not that we saw them winning this game, but
I can go back on what I saw 48 hours ago, 50 hours ago, and I can look at the numbers, and they can help an argument one way or the other. But you're right. It is Monday morning quarterbacking, but am I wrong?
You're right.
You lost the time of possession to the more talented team on the road by almost 10 minutes. Yeah. You were averaging over 6 yards per carry. That's your best player. Don't you think you might have wanted to get him the ball a bit more?
And you're going against the second best pass rush in the NFL, right?
And Scotty, like JaMychal Hasty, the backup averaged 9 per pop. He had 4 for 36. So whatever. I'm not going to
making it harder on yourself,
Doug Peterson. But we shall see. Abe, what is going on? Philly Drew, how are you? He's going with 27-17 Eagles this weekend. We'll be breaking that down
very early
as the week goes on, but I like it, man. Abe, I am feeling great too. And you hopped on in perfect timing, because we are moving on to this Eagles 38-7 Giants victory on 38-7 day when the Eagles shellacked the Minnesota Vikings at the Link in the NFC Championship game just a few short years ago. My man, I'll defer to you first on this one to get your thoughts on this beatdown. All I really want to start off by saying is all that talk, all that hype, for what? To come in, you're going to humble Nick Sirianni, you're going to humble Eagles fans? No, you all got humbled. The floor is yours.
Yeah. What a Saturday evening, right? In Philadelphia, when you have these measly little Giant fans coming into town thinking that they're going to turn this city upside down. They thought they was going to stop the green skies. Not a chance. This Giants team, come on. We gave them respect on the show beforehand. We gave them respect throughout the season, even though we knew they were frauds, right? We talked about it on the pregame show about how, was it the Giants that really got that victory in Wild Card Weekend, or was that those fraudulent old Vikings in Minnesota, right? And I think we have our answer now, and I think we know that the Eagles are skies and miles better than the New York Giants, and they proved it in every facet. All the question marks about Hurts, it was just getting ridiculous in that week leading up to this game. We didn't even have to exhaust the playbook. Literally, we didn't even have to exhaust the playbook.
He only threw for $150.
We didn't have to throw the ball. We didn't even have to run Hurts into the ground. Yes, He had a rushing touchdown. I think he had 7 carries in this game, 9 carries, something.
35 yards.
Not a lot. 35 yards. We didn't need to rely on Hurts for much in this game, so you were able to preserve him. The pass rush was getting home. They shut that offense down. Daniel Jones
They were
Daniel
hot,
Jones
though,
throws an
Scotty.
interception on the second drive, shuts all of that up, gets our crowd real hype off that James Bradbury INT. You know, the Giants, they came into this game and maybe they had no control over it, but they did everything wrong to start this game. Like, they started this game as bad as they possibly could, and they never had a chance the rest of the way, Dylan. What I will say, it was a great warm-up game in the divisional round to get us ready for the NFC Championship, and that's where I'll leave it. Those measly Giants, your season's over. We'll get to those cockroaches, but these big old cockroaches from New York, your season's over as well. I'll pass it to you, Dylan. I know you got something for me.
Yeah, that was just the icing on top, right? The icing on top, the cherry on top was just to see these question marks being these injuries, Jalen Hurts, Lane Johnson, Josh Sweat first came back, et cetera, seeing how they panned out, right? We're coming in and we're questioning, okay, can Jalen take a hit? How's Jalen's throwing shoulder holding up? Well, you know what they do on the first play of the game, Scotty? They take a shot to Devontae Smith right on the money. You know what they start doing early? Design quarterback run, something they didn't do last week. And to Phil's point, when he would run, he would protect himself. And that I liked, and I want to continue to see that when he's on the move. Lane Johnson, first game back. Now, we saw him grabbing himself a little bit, right? But once he got acclimated, didn't allow pressure. Not one. Yeah. That big, bad pass rush. Not a single pressure. CJ Gardner-Johnson. Now, I know he's been back for 2 weeks now. 2 games played before this one for CGJ. Loved, by the way, and we'll get into Jonathan Gannon's defense as we go through this segment. Love the fact that they were moving him from safety and nickel, right? He comes on that James Bradbury pick you talk about. Who was the pressure? Who was the blitz? CJ Gardner-Johnson, nickel blitz right through the hole. Daniel Jones gets rid of it right to James Bradbury for the interception. So to see all of these question marks, just to know what we would get moving forward, that was the icing on top. And then they just, I don't know why it's still or was taking people so long to understand that this Eagles team is legit. They're not just legit, they're great. And they very well might be the best team in football. In 2-3 weeks' time, we will have our answer, right? But for some reason, it still felt like they were being disrespected all week long, for the last 2 weeks even. And you got a full 60-minute beatdown for the first. It was the best football they've put together that they've played in over a month's time since before Jalen Hurts' injury against Chicago, right?
Absolutely.
So to see that all transpire, all play out at the Link in front of this crowd against the division rival, when you know that the competition is going to get stiffer as the road to the Super Bowl goes on, that's what was so beautiful about this. It didn't take an A.J. Brown monstrous game. Devontae Smith was good. He scored, had the big play, had the screen for the touchdown. That was fine. Miles Sanders, he didn't have to get in. No one had to go off to beat this team. It was a 60-minute beatdown, and I'll throw it back to you by saying this before we get into Gannon and all that. This right here by Abe. And I gotta say, I even think that you and I discussed Dayball Coach of the Year type of stuff last week, and he's in the conversation. I think Nick Sirianni took it a little personally. I really do, because listen, I know that the Eagles' talent is up here, the Giants' talent is here, right? So it's easy to say, well, his job's easier. He doesn't have to do blah blah blah. Nick Sirianni very well could be head coach of the year as well. And to hear all the talk about how Brian Daboll has his Giants playing, the things that he's done with Daniel Jones, as if we don't credit Sirianni at all for the development of Jalen Hurts as a passer from the Tampa Bay playoff game till now. As if we don't talk about his play calling and his ability to work with Shane Steichen from that playoff game till now. So I think Nick Sirianni took this personally. The audio of him telling the sideline judge, I know where the F I'm allowed to be, him giving the look into the camera. He's got a little bit of swagger to him with the chain on after the game. He's got a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not antics, but like just He's got something to him, and I love that about our head coach. And I think the team kind of takes on that identity. You saw that in the 38-7 win.
Absolutely, yeah. I love Sirianni's leadership, his personality, and I think he relates to his guys. I think if you could have an embodiment of this team and a head coach, it would be Nick Sirianni. I think they follow his lead. I think they take on his persona, the way he loves to learn, the way he likes them to get better every day, the way he likes to get better as a coach. And there's just a few things that I really loved about this game, and it was the Miles Sanders usage, the usage of the run game, right? It's almost like he was saving Miles' legs for the playoffs these last few weeks, right? Just kind of holding him in the back burner there the last few weeks of the regular season. You loved almost it was really the simplicity of it, I think, right? Like we didn't overcomplicate anything that we were trying to do as far as defensively, obviously only giving up 7 points. We obviously are going to get into Jonathan Gannon and what he was able to implement in this game. But then on the offensive side of the ball, like you said, you start out with that deep shot, but you didn't fall in love with it, right?
Right.
And that speaks to the maturity of Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, his play callers in the NFL, because they went with the rhythm of the game, and that was the best part. This Eagles team didn't look out of sync. They looked completely
Can I use
in
a word?
sync.
Can I use a word for this game? Perfection. It was perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 phases on both sides of the ball, the play calling, the execution, the offense, the defense, the atmosphere. It was perfect for 60 minutes. There was not a time in that game, a play in that game. Why would you, right? When you get up 14-0 in the first couple of minutes, you're not going to sit there and nitpick at a play call if you were down or tied right early on.
Yeah.
But it was perfection to start off this playoff run.
Yeah, and I think just as far as, question marks going into that game, because I won't lie to you, while I was confident in the Eagles, I was super nervous for what they were going to look like. I didn't want to have a tight game with the New York Giants. Like I didn't feel that if we were where we want to be at as a team, I didn't feel that we should have a tight game with the New York Giants, with them beating the Vikings, even with where they were at in their season. They're just not as good as what the Eagles can be at their ceiling and their true potential. And I think the Eagles showed that clearly in this one. But you look at guys in their first couple playoff appearances. Hassan Reddick answers the call with a sack and a half in this game, right? You had James Bradbury with the interception. I mean, just a bunch of guys answering the call. We talked about Dallas Goedert before the game. He goes out there, 5 receptions, 60 yards, and a touchdown, right? They get him the ball. The only thing, obviously, you're looking at AJ, but once again, it's not a red flag. I wouldn't say that. It's just one of those things where I don't expect that to happen again, right? Especially against a better team. I think that's why, just looking ahead a little bit forward, I think AJ is going to have a day this Sunday. But nonetheless, this team was just operating on full cylinder on all 3 facets, like you said. So I'm not going to keep hammering the dead horse here, but yeah, I was certainly impressed. What are your thoughts on the defense, though? I know you had some pinpoints on Jonathan Gannon's of what he implemented this game.
Listen, I don't want to get overly excited or overly positive about what they were able to accomplish, because it was almost what you and I expected. But the fact that media and other fans and people all week long were just chirping that this could happen if the Eagles play like Minnesota and their scheme and Jonathan Gannon's soft zone, and you got none of it, man. And so what was the major concern? Allowing Daniel Jones outside the pocket.
Yep.
And what was amazing, and I know Kaiser White got used as a spy early on, and he made 1 or 2 tackles. The Eagles were able to contain Daniel Jones with their defensive front. All it was their defensive line. Their edge rushers were able to contain that rushing threat of Daniel Jones. And you didn't have to go all out and sell out on his ability to get out of the pocket and escape and pick up first downs and chunk yardage that way. You talk about the middle of the field, right? Peter Schrager's wearing the Isaiah Hodgins jersey during the week. And 1 catch for 3 yards. Like,
oh, my God.
Darius Slayton, right? 1 catch for 4 yards. They did nothing. They could not move the ball, Scotty. And here's what I loved. I believe it was the second possession, because I think it was only 7-0 when Dable did it. He went for a 4th and 8, right? On the second possession of the game. That was desperation at its finest. That was watching what the offense accomplished on the opening drive and watching your offense struggle so far. And he said, we might not have another shot at this.
Yeah.
And that was all she wrote. And then he punts.
He knew it was slipping away.
A 4th and 6 around midfield in like the third quarter when they're down 21-28 or 28-0. It made no sense, right? So that was my point, man. Jonathan Gannon, this defense, they were incredible. You mentioned Hassan Reddick. Fletcher Cox had a sack. Brandon Graham had a sack.
Yep. Josh Sweat.
Josh Sweat. Well. The secondary, we already talked about CJ Gardner Johnson's ability to be flexible and play the slot and safety at the same time. James Bradbury wasn't thrown at when he was picked off from the CGJ pressure. Darius Slay did Darius Slay things, right? Or Slay, doesn't like to be called Darius, right? And then the main thing is, like you started off by saying it. You didn't have to do much. What was the play calling as vanilla as week 18? Obviously not.
No.
But it wasn't the full extent of the playbook. I'll tell you that much.
And just, this will be my last point on the game. And then I do have a question for you, just regarding kind of, aftermath of the game. But just looking at what this team's mentality, the mentality that they came out with. And obviously we saw the speech from Hurts leading up, talking about he's starving, right? He's not just hungry, he's starving. You see the mentality on the field at the end of that game, right? Where they're just still out there popping those New York Giants every time they touch the ball.
I'm glad you say that.
It's not just statistics or, only letting up 7 points. It was a punch you in your jaw type of affair that we were given to the Giants that night, because it didn't stop. Kayvon Wallace popped somebody on the final drive
was
for the Giants.
On throw and not given an inch of air for the rest of the game, right, from the opening jump. See, I love that you bring that up, but it's interesting. You go to the end of the game with that thought process, and I love it because the backups came. Gardner Minshew comes. Gainwell goes
more or
for
less
112.
Just thinking they're still doing it at the end of the game, right? That's where my head's at. But
my thought process, right when you brought up their mentality, was what is the one thing a great team cannot do to get upset? Allow a lesser talented team to hang around in the game or get off to a hot start.
Put them away.
Or you and I joked around that. Hell, Brian Daboll might put together a long opening drive and we might go down 7-0 and then we'll put the clamps on them while everyone starts to whisper, right? They didn't do that, Scotty. They came out, they knew the assignment, and they just took them to work, and then that was it, right? And on to the next one. So there's levels to this, as you like to say. Punch in your own weight class. Brian Daboll, the New York Giants, Daniel Jones, miss me, Mr. Bart Scott, with questioning who the better quarterback is. You have to be joking at this point. And I'll tell you what, the only reason I am not the only reason, because the Eagles are 1 win away from the Super Bowl, obviously, and they're hosting the NFC Championship game. So it's an amazing time. But it just, this past week, by talking to me, people threw so much fuel in the fire for this one, because ultimately we both expected a big win. That's what happened. But to hear how Daniel Jones is the future in New York because of how great of a season and turnaround he's had, dude threw 15 passing touchdowns, had 3 games with over 230 passing yards. To hear how Brian Daboll's the coach of the year, but Nick Sirianni with the 1 seed Eagles, who are 1 win away from said Super Bowl, hasn't been talked about probably since week 10. Yeah. They added so much. To hear how the Eagles are going to get put on upset alert, it just made this one so much better. From the opening jump, I was just great, but they're hot. They were the hot
team.
You
know what? And you know what? There's no going back on that, right? You can say whatever you want this week. You can make the Eagles favorites against the 49ers. You can pick the Eagles to beat the 49ers, but there's no going back on everybody that said they were going to lose one and done to the New York Giants, lose one and done period in the playoffs. There's no going back on that. So that underdog mentality, not even underdog, just dog mentality, is not going to go away. I don't care if every single analyst across the board picks the Eagles this week. They are still going to come out with that chip on their shoulder. They're going to come out ready to play. And this is thanks to everybody. It's not just they're just really talented, right? They're a really good team. They're well coached. They're very disciplined. But
that's what makes
not
it
only
so
that, you give us the
crazy to me.
extra motivation on top of that, right?
That's what makes it so crazy to me that when they get put in this underdog box. Like as if they didn't win 14 games this year.
Exactly.
As if they aren't the 1 seed and the road to the Super Bowl and the NFC goes through them. As if Jalen Hurts wasn't the MVP leader before his injury. As if this defense isn't number 1 and 2 in 97% of statistics on that side of the ball. But yet, I got told that Daniel Jones was going to walk into this atmosphere, into the link on Saturday night and come out with a victory. My goodness. Like you mentioned it. They can pick them. Peter Schrager, who I love Good Morning Football. It's
I love Peter
entertaining.
Schrager.
They're all great. I really like Peter Schrager, right? He apologized, said he was wrong. He might have got ahead of himself. But why? Whatever made you there? It's the 07 Giants.
Yeah.
You're like, why did that ever pop into your mind?
And don't take it back now. Like, dude, don't take it back. Like, that was idiotic. That was asinine, right?
Why
the
I'm Eagles proved me wrong. The Eagles proved me wrong. Not I got ahead of myself on the Giants.
Yeah, it's not ahead of yourself. It was just an asinine take. And whether you did it with with your heart or whether you did that with your mind, I don't know. It's not my place, but either way, don't doubt the birds, man. That's where we're at. But it's too late. It's too late. If you already doubted, don't switch sides now. It is too late,
this
man.
Week
but
is going to be amazing.
This
man.
was
Can I ask you
perfection.
one more question?
Is there any? Well, yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead. It may be the same question. I don't know.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I was talking to my uncle about it after the game, and it just felt it almost feels surreal to be in this situation because you go back to our only Super Bowl, right? Back to 2017-18 season. And while we were the 1 seed, we were literal point underdogs during that run, right? And it felt like even the Falcons game, I remember being so nervous. I walked into that Giants game on Saturday night. You know how confident I was. My pick, all my predictions was how confident I was. That played out, went like this, right, on to the next. And it just feels so surreal that we're about to host another NFC Championship game in which we're favorites and we're 1 win away from the Super Bowl, but it's like expected. Does it feel the same way to you? And does it feel weird? Because like I said, that Super Bowl run, there was a nervousness to it. And maybe that's because we had never won one and it was our first time being back in a long time. But I'm sitting here like I'm confident in this team to make and really win the Super Bowl at this point.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. I mean, it just feels too perfect. And, even taking it a step further, and once again, not trying to get ahead of myself too much here, because you look at this New York Giants game, man. This was a joke of a divisional round game. In all reality, like I enjoyed it a lot. Like I was having drinks. We were taking shots of Jameson every time the Eagles would score, and they scored 38 points. So we had quite a few shots. But
good thing it wasn't
aside from that. It was a warm up game for the Eagles, and don't get me wrong, I won't take that for granted. But I can't help but look forward now, right? And think about what this team can really do. Because now I know Jalen Hurts is good. Now I know he might not be 100%, but he can run the football. He can protect himself, and he can launch that thing 50 yards. That's all I need to know. And that was my main concern going into that game. There was all the speculation. You can't help but wonder because you're not Jalen Hurts. You don't know what he feels like, but he looked good in this game. So my confidence is sky high, but you even take it a step further and look at this San Francisco team that's coming into town, man. Brock Purdy, right? Like, I get it. He's been great. And we're not going to get too much into this convo. But Brock Purdy, a third-string quarterback that was drafted last, is coming to Philadelphia. It feels very Case Keenum, Minnesota Vikings-esque. That's what it very much feels like here. You know how they talked about Minnesota's defense that year and how Nick Foles was going to struggle and how Case Keenum could come into Philadelphia as Minnesota quarterback and take over the link. It feels very Case Keenum-esque in that situation. That's kind of where I'll leave it. That's how confident I really am in this Eagles team right now. And I can't wait to dive into this game and really, really give out my thoughts on it because I think it's going to be a hell of a matchup and it's going to be a fun one.
Me too, and we still have to break down this Niners Cowboys game in just a few moments here.
Absolutely.
But you mentioned Brock Purdy, last overall pick, as Abe said in the comments, coming across the country to the link, cold weather, and you saw the look in his eyes, some of the throws, the decision making when he was under pressure, under duress against that Dallas front. What do you think is going to happen here, especially with this crowd? Another reason I have optimism after watching that game, Scotty, Kyle Shanahan, and maybe he comes out and he wipes his hands clean and he comes out with a brilliant game plan and he destroys Jonathan Gannon's defense. I watched a dude that gave the Dallas Cowboys every opportunity to stick around and win that game. Listen, I know CMC was grabbing at his calf, etc. If you want to run Elijah Mitchell for the entire second half and CMC doesn't come on the field outside of third down passing plays, be my effing guest. If you want to drop back Brock Purdy 30 plus times and only give the ball to Christian McCaffrey 12 or 13 times and Deebo Samuel a handful of times, be my freaking guest. Kyle Shanahan, I thought, called a really, really bad game last night against upper echelon of defenses in this league. This was not the Seattle Seahawks. I'm very interested to see him and Brock Purdy against this Eagles team. Like you said, we'll break down that matchup as the week goes on and this weekend, but I'm really looking forward to it, man. Moving on to the Sunday slate. We just talked about probably the most dominant performance of the weekend. This one was right up there following in suit. Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals demolish Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo 27-10. Scotty, and you see the pregame warm-up, you see the videos, and you see the throw by Joe Burrow, Steph Curry-esque, right, turning around mid-throw and just no worries. No, Joe Cool, right? That's why they call him Joe Cool. Yeah. They walked in there and they took it to Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. And in multiple ways, Joe Burrow, 23 of 36, 2 touchdowns early on. Joe Mixon ran for $105, right? Samaje P. Ryan averaged almost 5 yards per carry. Joe Burrow escaped 6 carries, 31 yards. And Josh Allen and this Bills team. Now, I know he didn't turn the ball over and he threw the pick at the end of the game. I get all that. Josh Allen was bad yesterday. And that is the reason they lost this game. They lost this game because of Josh Allen and the fact that they cannot run the football. What were your thoughts on this dominating win by the Cincinnati Bengals?
Yeah, I think I'll take it even a step further. And this is a conversation I, got to listen to this morning on ESPN. But just kind of taking the attention to Sean McDermott and a defensive-minded head coach that kind of came into this snow blizzard game just looking to throw the ball down the seams. Now, I don't know if that is just Josh Allen and his decision-making that he's going away. Obviously, Stephon Diggs was very upset at the end of this game. But you saw Cincinnati's attack, right? Like, why not just mimic that attack? Like, literally, Cincinnati came out. They got the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands quick. They were able to get guys on quick slants. All they did was send guys slanting through the middle of the field the entire game, getting the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands quick. They ran the ball. They stayed committed to the run, and they ultimately did everything that the Buffalo Bills should have tried to do. Why was Josh Allen in the run game not implemented more in this game, especially in the first half? When you're in the middle of a snow blizzard, you're throwing up seam passes down the sideline to Gabe Davis in the middle of a snow blizzard.
He threw it was honest. He threw a 32 about 56.
Oh my God, man. Oh my God.
Now I know it hit Gabe Davis in the hands. I understand that. Just pick up the first down.
Yeah. Use your legs. I mean, right. I don't know, Dylan. It was very clear in this game, not only the levels to the coaching, because Sean McDermott, defensive-minded coach, Zach Taylor, offensive-minded coach, he came out there with a plan, and they obviously have a very good defensive coordinator on their side on Cincinnati. But also just the quarterback and the decision-making, man. Just those little things, like you said, Joe Burrow, he makes every perfect decision. Even when he decides to use his legs, it's very seldomly, but he'll go and he'll pick up a crucial first down with his legs when it's wide open. He has nobody around him, right? He's so smart. He's so detail-oriented. And while I think Josh Allen, he probably has more athletic ability, more talent than Joe Burrow is miles ahead of him when it comes to the mental makeup of a quarterback to win an NFL championship. And I think that showed blatantly in this game where you're in the middle of a snowstorm. I can't get past that part of it, man. But I thought
I'll
that
circle right back
showed
around. I'll circle
plainly in
right
this
back
game.
around to that quarterback point. A few things here. Cincinnati won the game because of their defense, and their defensive coordinator is severely underrated. They are a damn good defensive unit. Okay.
Yeah.
B, their offensive line. Burrow was sacked once. He was hardly touched.
Yeah.
Now the Bills don't have a great defensive line and pass rush, but I would say they're probably middle of the pack, right? I'd have to look at the season numbers, sack totals, pressures, all of that. But I know they're missing Von Miller, but that badly, Joe Burrow wasn't touched, especially in bad weather, as you mentioned. So you have that aspect. Josh Allen, again, was not good yesterday. That brings me to this. Maybe I'm overreacting. Joe Burrow has ascended ahead of Josh Allen as the second best quarterback in the National Football League. You talk about the mental makeup to win an NFL championship, and you're right. Joe Burrow does, outside of obviously being of the physicality and the runner that Josh Allen is. He doesn't have the athleticism that Josh has, and outside of the arm. Right now, Joe has an arm, but Josh's might be the second strongest in the league. Outside of those two things, Joe Burrow does everything better than Josh Allen. And I'll bring up the last point. I talked about it with Dan Campbell. I talk about it with head coaches all the time. At what point does winning become a factor? And not only that, the difference between being the reason your team wins and being a negative and being the reason your team loses. Josh Allen did not throw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the Bills lost because their defense couldn't get off the field yesterday. The Bills lost in large part due to their franchise quarterback, while the Bengals won because of their quarterback's arm and decision-making throughout this game. Joe Burrow is on his way back to Arrowhead this Sunday to go to back-to-back AFC championships. He is 3-0 against Patrick Mahomes, a man who before this year was taking it to Josh Allen. He is 2-0, or no, excuse me. They were starting to play for the first time. So Joe Burrow, I don't know if they played Buffalo last year or not, but Joe Burrow has the head-to-head against Mahomes and Josh Allen now. And if he gets to a Super Bowl, it's his second straight. And again, I know our Eagles have a damn good chance to make it. That is going to be one scary-ass game and one scary-ass quarterback to play again. So at what point does winning and being the reason you're winning play a factor? Josh Allen or Joe Burrow is a better quarterback than Josh Allen. And I do agree with this, Abe. They have no run game. Oh, that's the last thing I meant to bring up, Scotty. What was the trend this year and this weekend that we talked about with the Jags game? Let me ask you a question. Who won the rushing battle in the Jags-Chiefs game?
Chiefs.
Who won the rushing battle in the Giants-Eagles game?
Eagles.
Who won the rushing battle in the Bengals-Bills game?
Bengals, easily.
By a mile. 172 rushing yards to 63. Guys, it matters. I know the Bills don't do it well, and they ran a couple draw plays at weird times, like 2nd and 10, they try to run a draw play to Devin Singletary. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But to only run the ball 11 times from your running backs is ridiculous at home in a snow game.
And look, Brian Daboll, he's over there. Brian Daboll left the Bills. He went over to the New York Giants, obviously, to be their head coach. And I think you saw that clearly. They needed an offensive coordinator that knew what he was doing in that game, and they did not have it. And I'll even point out another thing. You know, a lot of talk about, who Josh Allen was playing with. It's funny. Coming into this season, everybody would have told you the Bills had the most weapons in the NFL. Man.
I don't want to hear that.
It's crazy, right? Gabe Davis, Isaiah McKinney. I mean, these are jokes at this point, right? Like Gabe Davis had maybe his worst game of his career in that one. Obviously, it's tough conditions with the weather, but still, if you're a good receiver, you're a good receiver. But yeah, Stephon Diggs upset. How did you feel about that, Stephon Diggs? Like, I feel you do, but I just feel like that was kind of childish too. Like, you're not getting the ball. I feel you. You're upset, and I feel that's wrong on Josh Allen and the rest of the team. But it's also childish, that reaction as well. So
I'll ask you a question.
You saw the way he left Minnesota. So
why were you getting locked up? Listen, Josh Allen wasn't good. I've already come out and said that. Josh Allen, I'm sure he missed more than a couple of reads when Diggs had a chance.
Why were you getting locked up? That's a good question.
Where was Stephon Diggs, 4 catches for 35 yards. He had 10 targets, Scotty. 10 targets. You came away with 4 receptions on 10 targets. Eli Apple, who you guys had this big back and forth, Eli Apple was in coverage in a lot of them. So that's my question, right? Josh was far from perfect. I gave so much blame to Josh Allen on this loss. But Stephon Diggs, you're a top 5 wide receiver. Some might argue top 4, top 3. Where were you?
Yeah, and see, I like Aaron's comment here because I think we were both on that stage going into this game, right? The trends pointed to it. Yes, the 8-game win streak for the Buffalo Bills, that was so misleading because I'm telling you, man, if they played that game against Cincinnati, they're losing that game. We see that now, obviously, right? So that was such a fraudulent streak, in my opinion, anyways, and they just weren't playing that good. You had a close game against Miami with Tua in Buffalo in snow. Then you had another close game against Miami in the playoffs against Skylar Thompson. They weren't playing very good football, but who was favored in this game? The Buffalo Bills were favored in this game. So it's not that, and maybe that's why the Bengals came in there with such a big chip on their shoulder, aside from the ticket sales and everything else, because that's the funniest part of this all. Joe Burrow, not only is he king on the field, this man is king off the field too, man, because he's just got the quotes of the century. I mean, he's the smoothest dude that I know. I mean, Jalen Hurts is a really smooth-ass quarterback, right? He's smooth in press conferences with media. He's smooth on commercials. Joe Burrow is that same exact guy, and I love it.
Better send those refunds, brother.
Better send those refunds.
To Abe's point, I agree. And like we sit here and I love Nick Sirianni's emotion and how he shows it and wears his heart on his sleeve as well. But I believe there's a time and a place to not only show your emotion, but in the manner that you show it. And there's a difference between being emotional and showing your quarterback up.
Yeah.
Again, where you had 10 targets. It's not like he only targeted you 5 times and you had 4 catches. So I don't know, man. I didn't like it. Especially like why? Because the season's coming to an end. Where were you 3 weeks ago when you only had a handful of catches, right? So don't show them up. I don't know if you saw the picture. Do you remember the AFC Championship game at Arrowhead where Stephon Diggs is standing there watching the Chiefs celebration? Someone posted it and said, "Dude hasn't moved in 3 years."
Seriously, though, because he's just standing there in front of Josh Allen. Like, dude.
I will say one last thing on this game. And I know we've kind of punished the Bills more than celebrated the Bengals, and I don't mean for it to come off that way. They deserve all the credit in the world. They are, quite frankly, Scotty, they might be looking like a powerhouse dynasty over in the AFC, right? Especially if they can win Sunday. Dude, if he goes 4-0 against Patty in back-to-back AFC championships in Arrowhead, that's a problem to begin with. But on the Bills side, 2 things. Listen, you and I are in agreement. I said this to you since week 1 when people were trying to say Gabe Davis breakout year and all this stuff from the divisional round game of last season. Miss me with that. But the Bills aren't lacking weapons. You have a top 5 wide receiver in the game. Dawson Knox is no slouch. Gabe Davis, I don't think he wasn't having a breakout year for my money, but he's not a bad number 2, right? You could potentially upgrade over him. They definitely, though, try to make Josh Allen do too much. And maybe that's part of the reason he has turnover issues and he has some bonehead plays. He's got to run the ball. He's got to throw the ball. He's got to be the hero. He's got to come from behind. So to have no run game definitely plays a factor there. Yeah. But Josh Allen has been a problem. So
I think they were, another thing to point out just before we move on, Von Miller, right? They brought him in to be that closer of the season, to get that pass rush going. Didn't have him down the stretch either, and that pass rush looked so weak by Buffalo, right? They didn't touch Joe Burrow in this game. Not only did they not touch Joe Burrow, they barely touched Joe Mixon. And so that's another issue, right? That front 7 just wasn't where it needed to be. Their secondary's heavily beat up at that point in the season. But to your point about giving Cincinnati credit, Lou Anarumo, I believe is his name. You said it. Underrated defensive coordinator, a guy that caught me off guard. They finally started saying his name yesterday for some reason, right? Like It's like the defense has been playing good. It's been opportunistic, and maybe it's a disservice because of I just never took the time to look him up.
Right.
But yesterday was the first time they're mentioning his name. I've never heard his name in head coaching talks, whatever the case may be. But to give some credit to Cincinnati, I think we've given it to Joe Burrow. We haven't talked much about Jamar Chase, but we know what these weapons do.
But I'm glad
that
you bring up the
defense is
Jamar
what
Chase
impressed
point.
me, though.
The Jamar Chase point is an interesting one because it takes me back to the Stephon Diggs thing. Like if you look at Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson versus the Giants, like we sit here and Stephon Diggs wants to call out his quarterback and have a conversation, candid conversation on the sideline at the end of this one. And I keep saying, like, where were you, right? And even if a defense is trying to take you away, look at what Buffalo allowed Jamar Chase to do. You don't think he was the focal point? Like, I know they have T. Higgins, they have other guys. Jamar Chase is the focal point of that offense, right? For an opposing defense to try to limit or take away. Scores the first touchdown of the game, wide open.
Yeah.
So whether you want to call that on Buffalo's defense or you want to try to match up the Diggs and Chase matchup there, one showed up, one got locked down. Whether it's the quarterback's fault, play callers, applauding the defense, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, Bills 10, Bengals 27, AFC Championship rematch. And we had the clips, but shout out to you when I was on my phone 2 weeks ago heading into this playoff picture to remind me of the bracket, because at least I believe we were 4-0 this weekend on picks and predicting the championship round, Scotty. So getting into that final matchup, can I say this was the worst game of the weekend?
Absolutely.
Now, maybe
people would argue the Giants and Eagles just because it was such a blowout. It's probably boring for non-Eagles fans.
No, that's fine. But I don't think
the
that
ugliest game.
Yeah, I don't think that closeness equals fun or entertaining. This was ugly. So I'll throw this one to you first. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'll say here is the Cowboys have an issue, and it's an issue that we've known about for quite a while as Eagles fans, and it's the fact that Dak Prescott is ass. Wow. And you get every once in a while, you get these 300-yard, 3 touchdown, 0 interception games, right? Like last week against Tampa Bay, where he made no mistakes. He's out there looking like a winner against that 8-9 Tampa Bay team last week. Tom Brady on his way out, right? Everybody's so confident coming into this 49ers game. But you had already seen this version of Dak. You saw it against the Commanders. You saw it against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it's when he is in tough situations, he will be the one to make the mistake. And he did that yesterday, and he got outplayed by a third-string, 7th-round pick in Brock Purdy. All he had to do is not throw interceptions yesterday, but he just can't help himself, Dylan. He can't help himself. He has to throw them. And he wanted to throw more than 2.
Yeah, he did.
He didn't want to stop there. He wanted to throw that pick 6 to end the game with Dre Greenlaw that he just dropped. There was so many missed opportunities by Dallas in this game. It was such a winnable game for them. We talked about Kyle Shanahan earlier. You're right. He gave them every single opportunity to win this game. But at the end of the day, you can take it to 2 levels now. Not only will the Cowboys cowboy, but Dak will Dak. Mm-hmm. And you see it every single time in the big moment. What about the kicker, man? I mean, come on. This dude was kicking the ball. He is literally lucky that the kick got blocked, because it would have been so embarrassing.
He is.
That
he
it would have destroyed his confidence even more.
Oh, yeah.
It would have destroyed it even more if it wasn't blocked.
He did bounce back.
That thing was headed over to South Dakota.
He did bounce back to make 2 field goals. I will say this, Dak Prescott is lucky that there was a Brett Maher headline into this one, because so many people were focused on that one. And then you see the shank kick that gets blocked, because you are right. It would have missed by a country mile, right? But Dak's lucky. And I'll say this, it's just becoming ironic at this point. You give him an inch, he tries to take a mile. I applauded him for the Tampa Bay game. He might have had the wild card performance of that weekend. He was fantastic. The offense was fantastic. Where was that against a great defense the other night? And I do want to give San Fran credit, because their defense did show up, held them to 12 points. But so did the Cowboys. Cowboys defense showed up in a big way yesterday. They should have won that game. Both play callers, both head coaches gave the opposing team every opportunity to take away this game. Christian McCaffrey wasn't really a factor. Brock Purdy wasn't spectacular.
No.
What's it come down to? Dak Prescott, and here's why. You mentioned the 2 interceptions, but it's been a problem with Dak all year long. It's not just the total. It's not just interception or multiple interceptions. It's where do you do these things? Early on in the game, I believe it's 0-0 at this point. He throws the first one inside his own 30. Scotty. His defense holds them to 3.
They blessed him.
He then, at the end of the half, with an opportunity to get points and lead at halftime, throws another one. Dan Orlovsky broke down the forced pass where Fred Warner knocks it down to CeeDee Lamb. T.Y. Hilton would have streaked into the end zone. He could have moonwalked into the end zone if he makes the right read there. His decision making, his lack of mobility, and the turnovers were too much for Dallas to overcome. And the final thing is, after all of that, he had Tony Pollard go down early on. What's that mean? Dak has to step up. He doesn't. After all of that, with 3 minutes to go in this game, 3 timeouts, a 2-minute warning, a 1-possession game, he had an opportunity to rewrite history, to wipe the slate clean, and to maybe have the drive of his career. He throws one into Dre Greenlaw's chest, which should have been a pick 6. He dirts one, I believe, to Michael, or overthrows Michael Gallup.
Almost gets a safety.
And takes a sack.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if you noticed this, but you know the whole clock management situation where they barely got the punt off before the 2-minute warning? That's because Dak was trying to keep the offense out on the field, and McCarthy had to call them over, and it took 35 seconds for them to get the freaking punt off. Dak Prescott, you're right. The Dallas Cowboys do have a Dak Prescott issue, and just to divvy up the blame a bit, they have a head coach issue. Now, don't get me wrong. Mike McCarthy was a lot better this year from last year. They won 12 games. They won a playoff game. His job's probably safe for that Tampa Bay win, by the way, unless Jerry Jones really wants to go after Sean Payton, right? Mike McCarthy's Dallas Cowboys, since he's been a head coach there, have had the same issues in this playoff game that they've had his entire tenure. They have discipline issues, inopportune time for penalties. That holding call with Kittle inside the 5 in the fourth quarter or third quarter, horrible. Look, what are you doing? Right, the late hit. What are you doing? Turnovers and then clock management. How did their season end to the same 49ers team a year ago, Scotty?
The same exact way.
Couldn't get a snap off inside 13 seconds. What happens this year? You waste 35 seconds trying to get a punt off. And that's how it ends. Mike McCarthy has his flaws. Kellen Moore has his flaws. Dan Quinn coached his ass off. But Dak Prescott is ultimately the reason that they lost this game.
The funniest part is Dan Quinn's going to be gone next season.
Yep.
That's the best part. He did an excellent job. But I just wanted to go to Phil's comment here because I disagree. I agree. The organization as a whole is ass, but I'm not taking that. I'm not divulging that comment away from Dak. Dak is ass. In the big moments, he shits the bed out of his ass. He is ass. That is what Dak Prescott is. I'm not letting that go, man. You don't lead the league in interceptions without playing all the games by chance, right? That says something about who Dak Prescott is. He needs it to be perfect for him to do anything. He needs either the other team to be down a few players or he needs the perfect situation with Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard and Zeke and everybody around him to support him. He can't win you a game, but he can definitely lose you one. And that's where I'm at with Dak Prescott. And I think Cowboys are there as well.
Especially with that narrative floating around about the turnovers and how it's this running joke. He's the punchline to a joke right now, Scotty. And then he throws two. Then the funny thing was like the Jacksonville game ender, right? It was funny to us, but it went off Noah Brown's arm, right? It wasn't. So you have that whole excuse. Well, it's not always his fault. Both of his interceptions last night were 150%.
100%.
fault. I don't know what his read was. I don't know what he was looking at. The announcer, was it Greg Olsen? Was it Greg Olsen? Yeah, Greg Olsen last night trying to, and he was great, by the way, but trying to say Dak never saw him. He's staring right at him. How'd he never see Fred Warner? He was staring him down the entire time.
He honestly, Dylan, he reminds me of Carson Wentz in those final seasons in Philly, man, where he just didn't look like himself. He looked out of whack, trying to do too much. And I don't know, if that speaks more to the Dallas Cowboys or if that speaks more to Dak, but at this point.
Little trailer here, little teaser here for Trending in the AM on DSM. Make sure you tune in at 8:30 tomorrow. I'm interested to hear it because I feel like I know where Phil's going with it. But you're wrong, but not why you think. I'm interested to see what the Beard's got up his sleeve.
I'm just not letting Dak off the hook anymore. No more.
No,
we've gotten the evidence that we need this season of what Dak really is, and two times in the last 2 years, right? The last 2 seasons, I should say, where we see Dak on an end of game just doing something completely ridiculous.
And I think while I ripped him last week for his Eagles-Vikings defensive take, Dan Orlovsky and Ryan Clark and all those guys were awesome today. They're always fun to listen to. But he said a very important thing. Jerry Jones paid Dak Prescott expecting greatness, and he didn't even get good.
Yeah.
He was that's the bottom. And Jerry Jones comes out afterwards and says, I'm sick. It's probably a large part why.
Yeah.
It really is.
And then he said, but don't forget, he said it didn't change anything about how he feels about Mike McCarthy, imagine Dan.
Great. I hope so.
Dan Quinn is leaving. Mike McCarthy's staying. That Tony Pollard is a free agent. Dalton Schultz is a free agent. Like, I know we have our own free agents.
The worst running back contract in the league. I gotta say,
Pollard breaks his leg. Do you pay Pollard now? Right. Do you extend Pollard? I don't know.
Zeke gets paid all this money to be a short yardage down back for them now. It's pretty funny. Listen, as an Eagles fan, I hope the Giants pay Daniel Jones. I hope the Cowboys keep Mike McCarthy, keep Dak, lose Tony Pollard, all that good stuff. Amari Cooper probably would have been pretty useful for them, right? But what I'll say
will be better, right?
Yeah. The last thing, damn, I just had a point now. It's slipping my mind.
Well, Dak's cap number jumps to $49.5 million from $19.5 million next year. So just something to throw out there.
That's pretty interesting. I love
19.5 this season, 49.5 next year.
That's pretty interesting. But no, I had it. We did our player rankings this offseason. And again, I'll say whenever I was wrong. And I had Ezekiel Elliott as number 10 on that list because I thought he still had enough juice. I thought that people were jumping the gun too early on him. He doesn't look like he's got much left. Now, whether that's because Tony Pollard looks so good in his usage, the play calling, whatever the case may be, Ezekiel Elliott did not look the same this year, and he's expensive as all hell. Before we wrap this up.
No, I was just going to say, once Pollard went out, I mean, that run game was done. It was over.
For sure. And then that's where the $160 million quarterback has to elevate himself and the offense, and he did the opposite. We talked about Josh Allen versus Joe Burrow being the reason your team wins versus being the reason for a loss. No middle ground, right? Dak has no middle ground. He's either a big reason they win or he is a negative to them, and that's what you saw last night. Let me ask you a question as an Eagles fan before we wrap up. How do you feel about the outcome of this game? I know watching the game, Eagles Twitter was exploding. It doesn't matter who comes in. And I see that. I told you. Brock Purdy, you got to see him under pressure, look like a deer in headlights at times. Kyle Shanahan, I did not like the game he called last night. Hope he does that against us. They're still, they were and still are the Eagles roadblock to the Super Bowl. Great defense, maybe the best in the league, 1 and 2 with the Eagles. They're a bit more ferocious, hard hitting, I'd say. McCaffrey, Debo, Kittle, Ayuk, good offensive line, normally a smart play caller. So are you happy with the outcome of this one? Do you prefer the Niners to the Cowboys? Because while we are shitting on Dak has torn this Eagles defense up over the last couple of seasons, right? So are you are you happy that the Niners came away with the win as an Eagles fan?
Yeah, I actually am. Ultimately, I told you before this game, I wanted the Cowboys to be gone as soon as they could. But to your point, Would I rather play Dak Prescott or would I rather play Brock Purdy? I'd rather play Brock Purdy 10 times
Right.
out of 10, right? I'd rather not play Dak Prescott. He knows the Eagles. And for some reason, even though Dak is ass against everybody else, he, for some reason, has his days against the Eagles. And I just don't need that in the NFC Championship.
Right.
I would rather play the 49ers with the rookie quarterback having to come into Philadelphia on a Sunday evening and win a football game against maybe not the number one, maybe the number 2 defense, right? So that's where I'm at with it. And also in this game, we talked about it earlier. Kudos to the 49ers. That defense is real. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. But they did give the Cowboys opportunities in this game. And I would say the offense, the San Francisco offense, gave those opportunities. Now, obviously, the defense was able to make up for it. That's the way that they've been able to win all season with that defense. But the other thing that I would look at, Brock Purdy, while it's great, he didn't turn the ball over in that game. He looked great down the stretch, right? He made some key throws in the game late in the game to kind of seal the win, right? He also had some very shaky moments in this game.
Sure.
And there were moments where Michael Parsons, that pass rush, DeMarcus Lawrence, was able to get a hold of him and able to manhandle him. And ultimately, you did see looks of fear in Brock Purdy's eyes. I know everybody is hyping it up today. They're saying how good and how poised he looked. And he did at times.
No,
he did at times. Not throughout that game did Brock Purdy look like he was some world beater at quarterback, right? And that was the best part for me. They showed weakness in that game against Dallas. Dallas defense is good. It ain't that good.
No.
We watched Gardner Minshew drop 27 points on that defense, right? So while Dallas defense played well, San Francisco defense played out of this world. That offense is lacking of something there at that quarterback position. I think our pass rush is going to be able to get after him. I think we're going to cause them some problems, but we'll get into that game this weekend nonetheless.
Yes,
we got plenty of time to break that down. But San Fran, credit where it's due. This is the matchup that needed to happen. This is the matchup everybody needs to see so they can believe that the Eagles are the best team in the NFL and the NFC, I should say, for now. They needed to see us beat the 49ers, so that's what they'll get next weekend.
I agree, man. Okay, guys, with that being said, that is going to wrap up this Monday edition of NFL Turf Talk here on DSM Media's Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter channels. If you guys want to check out all of our great content, I know we have Fairway to Heaven tonight, hosted by the Beard himself. That will be on around 7:30. Also making its comeback for the first time in a couple weeks because UFC was on a short hiatus, it felt like. Fist First will be back pre-recorded tonight at 9:15 on DSM Media. Don't forget to check all of it out on DSM_media. Hit that follow button and make sure you hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. For myself, for Scotty, we will be back here on Turf Talk as the week progresses and this weekend. Also live here this weekend, or hopefully live for Eagles pregame live. We'll see what the situation looks like there again. But again, thank you guys so much.
Maybe it's something we can have everybody, we'll have to ask you guys which you prefer, because maybe we can do a live one in the morning and then get it out of the way.
Potentially.
Maybe we can do it that way, but we'll see how it plays out.
With that being said, have a great rest of your Monday night and go Birds.
Go Birds.